Bimol, Interex dhe Palma.
Mysafiri imi sotëm është nga shqiptarët, nga familjet shqiptare që kanë emigruar në fillim të viteve 1930, pra të shekullit të kaluar në Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës. Pra ishte gjyshi i tij që kishte marrë rrugën e Amerikës dhe pastaj kishte sjellur edhe familjen e tij me vete, kurse mysafiri im kishte lindur në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Por duke qenë gjak shqiptari dhe nga një familje me traditë, ai kur kishte filluar hapja e Shqipërisë dhe po ashtu edhe problemet në Kosovë ishte angazhuar për të formuar edhe shoqatën e parë lubuese në New York dhe pastaj në Washington, kurse kishte dhënë edhe shumë intervista në mediat e atjeshme, duke ndikuar edhe te gazetarët dhe opinioni publik në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës që të kuptonte se çka po ndodh në Kosovë. Por rrëfimi i tij nuk përfundon këtu, ai ka qenë po ashtu i angazhuar edhe në projekte në Shqipëri, kurse thotë edhe se është angazhuar në çështjen që është përshkruar edhe në filmin War Dogs, pra në çështjen e Gërdecit, të shumë njohur, por vetës i thotë se ndoshta edhe ka ndihmuar që të rrëzoj dy kryeministra të Shqipërisë. Për herë të parë ndodhet në Kosovë, pra 25 vjet pas çlirimit të Kosovës, ndonë se ka punuar shumë për Kosovën dhe ekskluzivisht do ta dëgjojmë rrëfimin e tij sonte në Rubicon. Mr. Geri Kokalari, welcome to Rubicon.
Faleminderit.
So it's your first time in Kosovo. In my introduction, I said that you worked and you were so involved in Albanian and particularly Kosovo issues during the war, before the war, and after the war, but it's your first time. How come? How come?
I guess whenever I came, most of my family was in Albania, so that's where my roots were, so that's where really the focus of my attention was. So, but better late than never.
Yeah, and you've been only for a couple of hours in
Yeah, I just came
Pristina
this morning.
day.
I'll go back tomorrow afternoon.
So some 24 hours.
Yep.
And just in the beginning, I'm going to show some parts of your interviews during the NATO bombardments and beforehand that you gave to Fox News in the US. Ti shohim pamjet? heated debate there. You're really vocal about Kosovo.
Yeah, a little vocal. I was also a lot younger and had more hair.
Yeah, I can tell that. We're going to start because, as I said, for the first time you're in Kosovo and for the first time you are introduced in an interview in Kosovo television. So we're going to go with your background, the family. I did in my introduction say that your family went to the US in the first part of the 20th century. So can you tell us more about that?
Well, my mother's father came in early 1900s from Novica in the mountains of Labaria. And he was very much involved with patriotic movement for Albania. He was a president of Vatra in New York. He originally came to Massachusetts, moved his family to Rhode Island and then into New York, where
Shrazovan Pashun.
Shrazovan Pashun. Eventually moved his family to New York, my mother and her brothers and sisters. My father came from Gjirokastër as a young boy. He was about 13 years old. You know, the way they did it in those days is the father would come first, and then he'd send for the children several years later to try to get established. He did that. Unfortunately, when he came, when my father and his sisters came to New York, which was then on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, is where all the Albanians lived, his father died about a year later. So things were difficult. But there was a nucleus of an Albanian community on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Mostly Gjirokastrites and Albanians from Labaria. And that's where my mother and father met. And they've always been very active in the Albanian-American community.
And your father also served during the Second World War?
He served in the Second World War in the U.S. Army Air Corps. In fact, when I made some of the appearances regarding Kosovo, I'd make comments to the extent I'd said, you know, well, when my father went to war, they didn't ask questions about where they were going. So this is a commitment they made when they entered the services. So hopefully that gave me a dimension that many other people couldn't talk about. But so yeah, I'm proud of the fact my father served this country, our country, I should say. And
you were, as reading your bio, so you were not really involved with Albanian community as growing up.
No.
So you were raised American.
I was raised American, American ways. I certainly was involved in the Albanian community. I went to Albanian affairs. I think I mentioned that to you earlier that my aunt and my uncle had a small hotel in New York State. It was exclusively for Albanians. So every summer they'd leave Manhattan and they'd go up there to try to get away from the heat. But no, I was, I guess maybe trying to be more American than Albanian at that time.
So you were into sport, you were into rock bands first?
I played in rock and roll bands, I played American football, I played American baseball, and, sort of a very typical American background.
And you studied finance, and
Correct.
you went also at the college where, important now to underline, where Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, so all these big...
I went to the Wharton School, which is, many people believe the top business school in the world, certainly the top school for the study of finance. That's where I got my master's degree, my MBA. And most of my business over the past 40 some odd years has been in the world of finance, whether it was financing real estate or whether it was advising investors with respect to their investments.
So it was one person who got you more involved into Albanian world, Albanian issues. It was Tom Gjokaj.
I met Tom Gjokaj. He had come to my company. He was buying an office building. And it was about, I'm remembering then, I think it was close to $20 million, which back then, today it doesn't seem like so much money. They sell apartments in New York for $100 million. But back then it was a considerable amount of money, and I was kind of surprised because I didn't know any Albanians that could do a transaction like that. But he came to us to help with the financing of the building. And I guess he started, like a lot of Albanians, with apartments in the Bronx, but he was also very passionate about Kosovo. He was one of the major donors to the Kosovo cause early on and was one of the early people involved in lobbying for Kosovo. Personally, I did not know much about Kosovo. My family is from southern Albania. And like I said, I was involved in being an American, but, so when we were working on this deal for him, he found out I was Albanian. He became very excited. we became friendly. He said, what can you do? Can you help us? And he started telling me more about Kosovo. And we arranged a dinner with a top news producer in New York who used to produce the show Nightline. It was a very famous news show in Manhattan.
Tom Kaplan.
I'm sorry?
Tom Kaplan?
Ted Koppel. He was his producer. So we had, as a matter of fact, he was introduced to me by an Albanian friend from Philadelphia. They knew each other. So we went to dinner with Tom Jokai, and we talked about it, and he knew a little bit about, this fellow's name was Kaplan, was his name, the producer.
Yep.
He had been to this part of the world, and he knew a little bit about this story, and about what was going on with Kosovo and what was happening in the rest of former Yugoslavia. But he said, look, this is not, we need news, and this is not news. He said, really, that's not going to get much attention until there's blood in the streets. And, you know, that always stuck with me, because when there was, unfortunately, it came to there being blood in the streets before our media in the United States started paying attention. And that's how I ended up on television.
But this conversation took place when? Late 80s?
This was in the late 80s, yes, in New York.
When demonstrations started, like...
yeah, and Tom was very much involved with that. And then, unfortunately, he died.
Tom died.
Tom died, and so I didn't really have a good relationship with Kosovars. I didn't have any relationship with them. So that interest in that sort of died down for the time being.
So, and then you started working, lobbying for Albanians. First, it was the Relief Fund, right?
Well, actually, first we started, again, another television. There was a program in the U.S. after Albania opened up from communism called The Land That Time Forgot. It was by Barbara Walters, who was a famous TV journalist in the United States. And I saw what was happening in Albania after the communism, and it was very depressing. The conditions were so bad. So I got together with another Albanian in the real estate industry, as a matter of fact, because my business then was mostly real estate.
Wall Street.
No, well, then it was real estate. Now it's Wall Street.
Yeah.
And I still do some real estate.
Yep.
But he was involved in similar businesses as me. It turned out our families knew each other, and we both said, let's try to do something. We opened up this humanitarian aid organization to send aid to Albania. We sent over $10 million in aid. We had an office in the Pyramid Building in Tirana. But through this, I started meeting more Albanians. I started taking trips to Washington. And, you know, one thing led to another, and we moved on and started another organization down the road.
Yeah, and the other organization was National American Albanian Council.
National Albanian American Council. We got together leaders from the Albanian American community. We had people like Anthony Athanas, Ekrem Bardha, Bruno Salimai, Harry Baraktari, Sami Rapishti, you know, people that were known within the community, and many people that were very much interested in doing something for Kosovo. So I was responsible for raising the money in the beginning. I was responsible for opening the office, and to my knowledge, it's the first physical lobbying office that Albanians ever had in the United States. And it became a focal point for lobbying for Kosovo through the 90s and up into the war.
And you were in charge of finance.
I was the treasurer.
Yep. I think we got the original documents that you sent to us for the first documents of NAC, and probably we're going to see them later on. So how it went? So what did you do first with NAC?
First thing was organizational. Pulling the people together, setting up the meetings, telling how much money you're going to give. The first meeting we had Anthony Athanas on the telephone, and he's always been a big supporter of Albanian causes. Again,
He was based in Boston.
He was based in Boston. He was a famous restaurant operator. He had the biggest restaurant in the United States.
Year 4.
And but he was always a patriotic Albanian.
And he knew Konica and Noli as well.
That's correct. And he was from southern Albania, but he showed up on the telephone at this meeting. He didn't attend the meeting physically, but he showed up and he says, the first one, he says, I'm giving $10,000.
Through the phone?
Through the phone. And then everybody else around the table said, I'm giving 1,000, I'm giving 500. Ekrem Bardha said, I'm giving 10,000. And little by little, we put enough money together to get the organization up and running and set up the office in Washington. I left after about 2 years. I saw some conflicts, and so most of the work I did was...
What kind of conflicts?
The focus on Albania. I wasn't really happy about what some of the people they were associating with. So I would say that was one of the key ones. And so again, I left. I remained friendly with many of the people there, and we still worked on projects together.
And what did you do? So you set up meetings, you lobbied, you met with, for example, it was time when President of the United States was Bill Clinton, and Richard Holbrooke was his guy for the Balkans. So you met with Mr. Holbrooke.
Well, it was clear that Holbrooke had a problem, and it was clear the Albanians had a problem. So
what was Holbrooke's problem?
And that was Holbrooke's responsibility at that point. He was the point person for Kosovo. So I called him up. I didn't know him. And I said, you have a problem, we have a problem. Let's see if we can help each other. I suggested that we meet with, again, some of the leaders from the Albanian American community so we could tell them what we wanted done. And he was gracious enough to have a series of meetings with us. Most of them were at Bruno Salimai's restaurant in Manhattan. Excuse me. And you know, we had some very candid meetings. We all pretty much unanimously, we told them that we wanted to see military action. They were a little concerned about that. They were concerned about how it might be received by the Kosovars.
And this was 98?
This is 98, summer of 98.
Yes. KLA was operational throughout.
Operational, and they were. The other thing is they didn't seem to have a firm grasp on who UÇK was. But as I said, as I told you earlier, we had people from UÇK affiliated with UÇK at the meetings. He didn't know that. There was one episode, as a matter of fact, Dino Asanhaj was at one of the meetings, and he wanted to compliment him. So he said, you know, anyone ever tell you look like Robert De Niro? No.
Holbrooke told that to Dino Asanhaj.
I didn't see any resemblance, but Holbrooke, you know, wanted to flatter him.
All right.
But then he said...
Mr. Hassana was representing KLA.
Well, technically, no.
All right.
Obviously, he had relationship. He had a relationship with Thaci, another UÇK. The restaurant we were in, Bruno's, was one of the bases for raising money for UÇK. So, and there were other people from UÇK that came to these meetings. I don't really remember their names, but some of them came. And there were also people there from LDK, as well as from Vatra.
Do you remember who was from LDK?
Marianne Truby. And Harry Baraktari was affiliated with LDK. There were Agim Karagiosi from Vatra. Sami Rapishti, who's always been very much involved in the Kosovo cause, but he's originally from Skodra. And what Holbrooke asked us, he says, well, what do you want? What would you like the United States to do? And he went around the table. He goes, I want each one of you to tell us what you want. Every man said the exact same thing. 2 words. Bomb them.
Bomb them. And eventually, Holbrooke made a phone call to President Clinton?
No, he got, well, he was talked to Clinton all the time. But just remember, I don't know what they discussed. He doesn't, he's not going to tell us what he's telling the President of the United States. But one of the meetings, he did take a telephone call from Bill Clinton. So we had something that I don't know really the Albanian community had at that time was a direct pipeline to the President of the United States. And this was a very critical point in history for Kosovo.
And how did the lobbying continue? So how did you end up, again, in television?
That's a good question. Someone said they're looking for Albanians. And, you know, because I was involved in these things, they said, why don't you talk to them? And once you go on one show, the other shows start calling you. Sometimes I think there was a hand in the background, because what I was saying was helpful to the administration. So I think people from either State Department or Clinton administration were telling them, put me on, because I was trying to tell the American people that you should support this. My purpose on...
They needed justification for their actions as well.
I had basically two objectives doing this. One was to combat Serb disinformation and others that were critical of the war, that didn't want us to be there. And the other was try to get the support of the American people. So hopefully I some way contributed to that.
So you went to many programs?
Oh, I was spending most of my time. The good news is that my office in Manhattan was right across the street from Fox News. It was right across the street from NBC, so I didn't have to travel very far. But I was going into one, out of the other, and it was constant. I couldn't even concentrate on business.
And also, there was need to convince some certain people, among them someone very with a lot of influence, Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger, it's an interesting story. I sent him a letter. It was kind of a hard letter. I basically was accusing him of having been involved as a consultant to Milosevic. That might have been pushing.
This is the letter.
It might have been pushing a bit, because I believe what his involvement was is he worked with, when they were introducing the Yugo to the United States. Maybe he did other work with Milosevic, I don't know.
They failed with Yugo, though.
I'm sorry?
Yugo failed in American market.
But I was telling him, you know, I was sort of saying, oh, you know, you shouldn't be involved in Milosevic. You're an influential Jewish American. You should understand what genocide and ethnic cleansing are. I said, you know, the Albanians helped the Jews during World War II. He had been, at the time, what prompted me to do this is he was talking before Congress. He wrote an editorial in the Washington Post saying that we should not get involved. This is not our business. Let's not get involved with Kosovo. Then, I didn't hear from him. Then I was on another television show called Hardball. He was on the show the same day. Different segment, but the same day. So I was waiting. They have waiting rooms. They call them the green room. And I'm watching him on television. And now he had changed his position. Because basically his position is, once you commit yourself, there's nothing, you should accept nothing short of victory. So he even was talking about possible introduction of ground troops. So he came out of his segment, and I'm waiting in the room. He's coming in that room. As I'm coming out, I came face to face with him. I said, Dr. Kissinger, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gary Kokalari.
So you met him directly?
Face to face. And he said to me, he's looking there, he's like looking like this, didn't say anything. And then in his heavy, very, very obvious accent, you know, he said, "You're the one who sent me that nasty letter." So I said, well, you know.
So he read the letter?
Huh?
He read the letter?
He read the letter. They don't always answer the letters, but I know a lot of times they read them. And then, I forget, there was some small talk, and then he said to me, "Now I'm doing what you want me to do." Now, I don't know if I really prompted him to do that. I think it was really a sequence of events. But, you know, obviously he got the letter, and he took note of it. And then we said goodbye. Several weeks later, I got a call from his office. The secretary said, "Dr. Kissinger would like to meet with you." Of course, I would take the opportunity. The problem was, I was leaving the next day to accompany a shipment of humanitarian aid. We did an airlift to Macedonia for the Stankovic refugee camp. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be here." I said, "But I'll call when I come back," which I did. A great opportunity to meet with, you know, he's one of the most important statesmen of our time. And we never got it together. So, but I had a little bit of an episode with him.
And also you met Rudy Giuliani, who was former mayor of New York. You were collaborating with him to get some aid.
Yeah, Giuliani. So my family had a close friend named Claire Schulman, who was president of the borough of Queens. And a lot of Kosovars don't know about her, but she helped us a great deal because she opened up doors in Washington.
What is her name again?
Claire Schulman. She passed away a couple of years ago. But my family has known her for many, we're close friends with her. Very nice lady. And again, she was president of the Queens Borough. So she called Rudy Giuliani and said, what can we do? I asked her, I said, what can we do? We need help with humanitarian aid. The Kosovars are being shoved out of Kosovo. They're being put in refugee camps. What can we do? She called Giuliani, and Giuliani agreed to open up every fire station in New York. And we went to a press conference together, and he was asking New Yorkers to bring aid to their closest fire station, whether it was food, canned food, diapers, first aid, whatever it was. Then they collected it all. They brought it to a very big warehouse in Brooklyn. And the city also arranged for us to get an airlift. So we took the stuff on the airplane. Abni Mustafa was with me that time. And we brought it to Stankiewicz. And so he was helpful on that too.
Now, can you tell us about Serb lobby in the US back at the time?
You know, I've thought about that. And I think the Albanians had a bit of an advantage. There was not much Serb, I'm not familiar there was much Serb lobbying. What could they lobby for? For Milosevic? They had nothing to go there and talk about. They could, well, he's being, you have to help him suppress the Kosovars. So, in a way, they were caught off guard. Of course, the Albanians had been lobbying since 1980s, 1990s, and mostly Kosovars were doing this. And believe me, I'm just one person that did this. There were many Albanians that were involved in this for many years, and the Kosovars deserve a lot of credit. And a lot of these guys, were not big businessmen or anything. Many of them were working as doormen, they were working in restaurants, but they made sacrifices, both of their money and their time, because they cared so much about the cause of Kosovo.
And your story didn't end here. You were also active in Albania.
Yeah.
Mostly in business part.
I'm sorry?
In the business part?
No, not in business.
Advice?
Through being involved with the Albanian Relief Foundation, you start meeting other Albanians. I met Salih Berisha in the mid-90s, and even he asked me if I could do something to help Albania. So he asked me, he's the president of Albania at the time, if he's going to ask me, I'm going to try to help. Frankly, that did not work the way it was supposed to. I did what he asked me to do. He wanted, I remember I had a meeting with him in the Plaza Hotel, and he said, what Albanians can help us?
Plaza Hotel in New York.
In New York. The first name that came to mind was Kemal Adham. Most Albanians don't know who he is, but he was the wealthiest Albanian in the world and one of the most influential people in the Middle East. He was the brother-in-law of King Faisal. He was in charge of all internal security in Saudi Arabia and a very well-respected man. So he said, well, can you help us? We tried to reach him. So I have friends in Saudi Arabia. I called them. They knew who he was. They said, yes, he'll meet with you. I went to his office in Jeddah. I was taking a trip to Albania. I first made a trip to Jeddah. And he said, my son will take care of this. So I'm in his office with his son and 4 other Saudis. Every one of them was a billionaire. And they said, well, if Kemal Adham wants to go there, he wanted to come and see what was happening to see if he could help. And they said, these other guys said, if he's going to go, we're going to come. So I went to Albania. I said, Salih Berisha, we need a letter. You have to invite him. It's protocol. This is not some little guy. He's a very influential guy. For some reason, he changed his mind. I don't know why. I'll never know why. But it pissed me off.
And what did you do?
Well, the other thing that happened simultaneously with that, or around the same time, were the pyramids. That got me annoyed too, because
96, 97.
Yeah, because I still believe that the person that's most responsible for the pyramids was Salih Berisha.
You still believe that now?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He was warned. I sent him a letter warning him. I talked to the finance minister there. I warned him.
Sent him a letter.
I sent him a letter.
What did you warn him about?
I said it's not if the pyramids collapse, It's when they're going to collapse. And when they do, there's going to be civil strife. I don't know if he ever saw it or read it, but I told the finance minister.
And it was when, this letter?
This was in 96, late 96.
Before collapsing.
Before it collapsed. I told their finance minister. I told their UN ambassador. And they all said, you don't know what you're talking about. This is no. And Salih Berisha used to go on television with Vabi Alamuchai, who was the head of one of the biggest pyramids. And he told the people from Albania, don't worry, your money is safe. It wasn't safe. And I'm not the only one. There were many financial experts that told him the same thing. He did not want to listen. And so I blame him. And not only did he cause that chaos, but I was just in Albania. I haven't been there in a while. I can see there's been enormous progress. That episode, the pyramids and the collapse of the pyramids, set Albania back 10 or 20 years. They would have been so much further ahead if they hadn't had that. It was stupidity is what it was. So that and the situation I had with this Kamal Adham soured me on Salih Berisha. So I started openly criticizing him. And
where did you do this criticism?
Usually writing articles that got published in Albania. Occasionally I would go to Albania and I'd be on television stations there.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of television in Albania.
But also one thing that would interest people in Kosovo is this infamous case of Gërdec and the story behind it. So eventually you're one of the characters in the book that then went to become a big movie blockbuster. You knew Kosta Trebitska, who was found dead, and the War Dogs is the movie that I mentioned, is with Jonah Hill and Bradley Cooper.
Right.
What was your role in there?
Well, just backing up a little bit, after I had the situation where I split apart with Salih Berisha, for a brief period, then I started attacking Fatos Nano.
Who came to power
after him. And Salih Berisha saw that, and he liked that. So he sent someone to see me saying, well, he respects you now, blah, blah, blah. He wants to help you. That's another chapter, but at the end of the day, I helped attack Fatos Nano, which was helpful to Salih Berisha.
Why did you end up attacking Fatos Nano as well?
Well, Albania had a very difficult time. I went there when it first opened up from communism, and you could see the people were very poor. I always say it looked to me like a zombie movie. They didn't know what to do with themselves. And I felt bad that they had to encounter the pyramids and live through that chaos. And I felt I had to do something. And Fatos Nano comes in to power, and he was a very corrupt man. So rather than try to help, I was very idealistic. I thought, well, why isn't he helping Albania? Why is he helping himself? So I started having a problem with him. So he goes, he's finished. Salih Berisha takes over. And then I finished with him for good.
With Berisha?
Berisha. Because he basically used me.
How did he use you?
He used me to attack Fatos Nano. And then once that was done, he was finished.
But why were you so involved in Albanian politics?
I wasn't so much involved in Albanian politics as I was involved in trying to set Albania on the right course. As I said, I was very idealistic.
From what position you were doing that?
Basically myself.
As an individual?
As I had organizations that ostensibly I was working through, but my family was known in Albania. I came to start developing a profile in Albania, so people would listen to me. I don't know why. Maybe because they thought I was making sense.
You also had business interest in Albania?
No, none. Never. As a matter of fact, I legally could not have business there. So
it was more emotional from your background?
More emotional, idealistic.
Family.
So then I knew Kosta Trebitska. I knew him. He contacted me, I guess it was back in maybe it was mid-90s, because he knew I was involved in business there, and he was a businessman, so he wanted to meet me. As I said, I started to develop a reputation in Albania. And we kept in touch. As a matter of fact, I saw him in Tirana during the war. I was in Tirana.
During the Kosovo War.
Kosovo War. And we got together briefly to see each other. And then he contacted me, I guess it was 2007 or 2008, I'm trying to remember. And he knew at that point I was again at odds with Berisha. And he said, I had a contract to repackage the Chinese ammunition. First of all, stepping back, this company AEY won a $300 million contract to supply ammunition. They were going to sell it to the US Army to be used by the Afghan Army because they had AK-47s. So they needed ammunition. The United States doesn't make ammunition. So they found it in Albania. What they didn't know, it was Chinese manufactured. This was illegal.
Yes, because US doesn't use Chinese.
Doesn't use it, and they banned it.
Yep.
They banned it. So these guys from Diveroli, who was the head of AEY, and is shown in the movie's not so accurate. The movie's maybe 50% accurate. The
50% accurate.
I'm sorry?
50% accurate.
A lot was made. Brad Cooper, that story was made up. There was a guy, an arms dealer, but not that was made up. A lot of it, you know.
Jonah Hill is this guy.
Diveroli is, you know, he's a crazy guy.
Yeah.
So they hired Costa Drabiska. Basically, I think they sort of picked them out of the telephone book. I think they went to, I forget, Albanian American Chamber of Commerce or something. Costa Drabiska was a businessman. He had a packaging company. So I guess he was a logical guy to hire. So they told him if...
This is accurate in the movie, as I recall.
Yeah, but they don't mention him. Yeah, it's part. The movie is a true story, but fictionalized.
Sure.
Okay? So they hired him. And in the middle of the contract, they said, well, we're sorry, we have to take it away from you. And we're going to, then he found out they're giving it to Della Giorgi. Now, I don't know what the truth is, but according to Costa, he alleged that Della Giorgi was in business with Shkelzen Berisha. And he was pissed off.
Shkelzen Berisha is Salis Berisha's son.
So he wanted to get back. He lost money on the deal. They took a, you know, I think it was a $250,000 contract, something like that. And he didn't know how to do it. He knew that I was out there aggressively criticizing Berisha. So he contacted me. And he said, I've got this tape recording of Diveroli, the president of AEY, saying that it's a corrupt deal. It went up higher to the prime minister, meaning Salih Berisha, and his son. So I'm listening to this, and I'm saying, well, this doesn't sound good. He gave me contracts showing where they were buying the ammunition from, where it was coming from. It was flowing through a company in Cyprus. There was an arms dealer, a real arms dealer called Henry Tomet involved. He was a guy that had a black background. So anyway, they took him out. He asked if I could help. He gave me all of this information. I took the information. I went to the New York Times. The New York Times made it a front page article. I took it to the...
You went to New York Times?
Yes. A guy named C.J. Chivers. He was one of the top war correspondents of the time. He was an expert on the AK-47. He's a former Marine captain. So he was very interested in the story.
So you're the person who broke the story?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And it talks about it in the book, and C.J. Chivers even acknowledged it in one of his books. So, and I brought it to the Oversight Committee of U.S. Congress. I arranged for Costa Drabiska to be interviewed by them. I brought it to the Department of Justice, and eventually the whole house came down. And Diveroli was arrested. Pacos, another guy involved, was arrested. There was a guy from Utah. He was arrested. They were convicted by the Department of Justice, and they went to jail. No one from Albania was ever touched, though. And that annoyed me because, obviously, it took another side to do that deal. They were working with the Albanian MICO, the Albanian agency of their equivalent of the Defense Department that was supplying the ammunition. And it's very hard for me to believe that Salih Berisha didn't know what was going on. It's impossible.
It's impossible.
It's impossible.
For him not to know.
A $300 million contract to supply the U.S. military with weapons and ammunition from Albania, it's impossible for him not to know.
And what do you now know about what happened with the explosion in Gërdec? How do you see that?
Well, you know, some people put those two together. They're sort of related but separate. Because the common thread with Gërdec and AEY was that Della Giorgi, who was given the repackaging contract for the Chinese ammunition, he also had the contract for Gërdec. And I started investigating that and found out that the way they were handling the ammunition was, there was gunpowder all over the floors, and people were smoking in the factory. It was a recipe for disaster. And I don't know if that's what ignited the explosion, but they had children working there, they had women working there, and it was horrible. And Berisha, the first thing he said, "Oh, I don't know anything about this." Well, maybe you'll remember because your brother-in-law worked at the factory and he died in the explosion. Do you remember that? So he tried to first plead ignorance, but he knew exactly what was happening.
And are you still following the politics and what is going on in Albania, in Kosovo?
Not very closely. I have a hard enough time following the politics in the United States, which are crazy.
And one thing that I read in your bio, in your own words, you said, and I'm quoting, "I had a hand in bringing down at least 2 governments in Albania. As a result, if Fatos Nano or Salih Berisha have photos of me, it's likely they're using them to throw darts."
Well, it's true. When I say it's true, I mean, I certainly did not help their profiles. As I said, I was involved in highly criticizing Fatos Nano, and a lot of people listened to what I said. Even Salih Berisha's people, after the election, they came to me and said, "Thank you, you did a good job." Not the only person who was involved, but I had a voice. And similarly, then when after Salih Berisha had been prime minister, and the situation, the problems that I saw with Gërdec, AEY, et cetera, I was highly critical of him. So, you know, people in Albania, they took notice because I had some profile there, let's call it. And, you know, was I the only one? No. But I think I did help change some minds.
And there is a discussion now saying that Serbs, like compared to before, now are more stronger with lobbying in Washington, D.C.
That's very interesting
and
you say.
Albanians are weaker.
The Albanians
now.
are not, first of all, I don't think they have the same passion because they had, you know, the Albanians were being repressed before here in Kosovo. So that has taken some of the desire away, I believe. I don't know if the Serbs are lobbying more, but one thing I think they should think about here in Kosovo, and this is going to sound maybe silly to some people, but the Serbs are starting to get a very positive profile. Why is that?
They're getting a positive profile.
They have the top players in the NBA. They have the top players in tennis. And people are learning that they're Serbs, and there's no Milosevic around anymore.
Interesting point of view.
So they're looking at Serbs saying, hey, these are great athletes. So they're starting to get more of a positive profile. And I don't know that the Kosovars are working that hard for the...
It doesn't help that we have Dua Lipa, Rita Ora.
Most people don't know Dua. When I tell people Dua Lipa is Albanian, they're surprised. So it doesn't hurt. They're good role models. But, you know, it's a different story now. I think they should... I don't know that they're actively or aggressively lobbying that much. But the profile of the Serbs is different now than it was then. And I'm very concerned about the involvement of the Russians. It's very dangerous.
So they are helping Serbs.
They're helping the Serbs. They would like to destabilize the region. And I think people have to remember that. I know there's some discussion here about where the role of the United States should be, but you can't turn your back on the United States either. There's an old saying.
Do you think that someone wants to turn their back
Well,
on
you know,
the United
the
States
ambassador
in
just
Kosovo?
spoke up, and he's apparently the relations are sort of cool right now.
The U.S. ambassador to Kosovo.
Yeah, he was just in the news recently. I guess what I would tell everyone is don't bow down to the United States. I'm not telling you everything in the United States is great. I think they turned the blind eye to some of the corruption that was going on in Albania. I personally brought information to them that they ignored, like on the Alpetrol privatization. I brought facts to them. They may believe it wasn't there. So don't take everything the United States says as gospel. But by the same token, you know, there's two old sayings I think about in this. One is no man is an island, and Kosovo is not an island. I don't see any water surrounding Kosovo. So you have to think about that, because on one side, there's no water, but there are a lot of sharks in the form of the Serbs. And the other thing, there's something called the Golden Rule. It's in the Bible. The Golden Rule is something like do unto others as you would do unto yourself. But there's another golden rule, and that's he who holds the gold makes the rules. So I'm not saying to lie down in front of the United States, but you have to maintain a relationship. And the United States has an interest in keeping stability here in the Balkans. The last thing you want is for them to pull away.
That would be a disaster.
This could be a dangerous neighborhood. And regardless of what the Serbs, they're supposedly talking about being with the EU, they're flirting with the EU. Let's face it, they may be flirting with the EU, but they're in bed with Putin.
And what would be your advice to Kosovo, to Albania now, in terms of relationship with the US?
I think they have to maintain a relationship. I think they have to remain open-minded. I think they have to figure out a way to get the United States to help. I mean, because the ultimate role here is for Kosovars to make sure there's no further threat from the Serbs, make sure that they are recognized as being a fully independent country, hopefully be integrated at some point into the EU, so they can live their lives in peace, so that they can prosper and move ahead.
Mr. Gary Kokalari, it was a pleasure having you in my studio. Thank you for the interview.
Faleminderit.
Faleminderit.
Mirupafshim.